We have a lot to talk about, and I'm going to answer whatever questions you have. Um, this last 2 weeks has been some of the most remarkable in the entire time that we have been doing, been watching, seeing what's going on with um, the war. I think the Kharkiv offensive is the only other time that I find to be more like, wow, did that just happen? Um, and maybe Kursk is actually more of a wow because you're actually invading into Russia. And invading into Russia turned the tables on Russia in a significant way. And Putin doesn't know how to handle this, what has happened. He doesn't know how to process exactly this incursion. He wants to fix it, but he wants to cross more. And so I'm not sure how to explain it. He's willing to suffer the losses in Kursk, at least in the short term, in order to deal with getting the prize that he's after. And he's going to keep grinding men down in uh, the Donetsk region in order to get them across. I was calculating. I just shot the video for today's daily brief, and I'll put it out in just a little bit. I think Greg Terry's in the chat, and he said 100% accurate analysis. We talked about that yesterday on Greg's. I was in his chat as he was talking. I was just working on other things in my office, listening to him and Jania, and I put that comment out there. I was like, yeah, I think that's he wants to cross more than he wants to defend his own territory, and it's fascinating to watch. It really is fascinating to watch, and he won't be tarnished by it because he's going to blame somebody else, and some other general somewhere is going to be on the chopping block for that. I put out yesterday that I'm going to do this live stream. It's open to anybody who wants to come. Sometimes I just do this just for patrons, just and members, just to say thank you. But here, whoever wants to ask a question, happy to answer whatever I can possibly answer. I'm going to prioritize by whatever the most recent question is. And if I miss you, I'm not just trying to slight you, unless you're asking something moronic or insane, like when will Russia win or something stupid like that. Um, but I will try to answer it. So feel free to cut and paste and put the question in multiple times. When I put this out yesterday, that I decided I was going to do this, I said, okay, so what questions do you have for me? And I'm going to go through a few of these while people populate, and then I'll answer your questions. So, President Putin's recent pointless excursion to Tajikistan and Chechnya was his Dacha and security detail shopping, getting ready to disappear, or just getting out of town while things calm down. So, it's interesting that he was taking these, like, he's got other things going on, but this is a pretty important thing. So yes, he had pre-scheduled trips to these other places, but to not address this just seems kind of weird, right? Like you would think, like imagine if this happened in the United States or some other country, and the president was like, you know what, I still have to meet with the organization of uh, canning manufacturers today, and that's on my schedule. So I'm not going to cancel that and deal with the invasion of whatever, right? Like something wouldn't be right. Um, Allison Marlowe, 184 says, Putin's reaction to Kursk reminds me of junior high school when I had an important term paper to work on, but instead I kept going to the piano until I memorized Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, just procrastination and aversion tactic. Yeah, that it feels kind of like that. Something's just not right. Um, Okay. So, Wayne's World of Science and Technology said, Darren, let's shrink Putin, analyze him culturally, and your response to his fancy pick. So there were some people that were saying that, that, well, he sent out his doppelgangers. I don't know that that's true, so I'm not going to make that argument. But he is making public appearances, but he's just not spending the time that you would expect. Like there was a picture of him and Gerasimov that looked like they were talking about maybe something military or something, and there was no sound, and maybe they were talking about it, maybe they weren't. I just don't know. But he just doesn't want to appear He doesn't want to be tainted with this negative thing. And that's true. Many authoritarians do that kind of thing. They try to pass the buck and shift the. I'm over here. I wasn't part of that. I mean, yeah. So I think that could be happening. Interestingly, my wife mentioned him, and she hasn't heard me say this, but said, "Yeah, he's kind of like a mob boss in the way that he works." And I think that's a really accurate analysis. I've been saying that for months, if not years, that if you want to understand how Putin operates, a mob boss is pretty close to the best analogy that I can come up with. Um, I mean, there might be some differences between them, but the similarities are just uncanny. Okay. Greg, again, one concept for consideration in the demented Soviet mindset, Kursk region to them is no different than Kharkiv, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kherson regions, which they claim to be theirs. That's really interesting, Greg. Let's talk about that a little bit more later. Um, Yeah, let's expand on that, when we do something a little bit later, because we're already going to do another video, later in the day. That's a good thought. Okay, does it make sense for citizens of NATO to petition for combat medicine research or near Ukraine? Citizens of NATO to petition. I'm not sure what you're asking, Bruce. Are we going to see a major Ukraine strike to celebrate Independence Day? I don't know, but I mean, just having survived is celebrating Independence Day, and they're only 33 years in deep, but they really, really relish their independence, and they're not letting it go easily. As a matter of fact, that's how Putin eventually got into power after the USSR collapsed, says Joseph Gallagher. I'm not sure what you're referencing there, but okay. Um, Megan says, I believe the governor of Kursk was told to inform Putin of the military situation in that interview specifically so Putin could say, not my area, to distance himself from the disaster. Megan, that might be, there might be something very true about that. Um, that's really an interesting thought because e- everything's scripted and he sets himself up to look like, I'm above this. It's not really me. You will tell you what's going on. We have the situation under control. And it's always going according to plan. I'm pretty sure Kursk wasn't part of the plan. Um, sorry, referring to your comment. Oh, okay, Joseph, you were referring to the comment about my wife's comment about the mob boss, and that makes sense of, as a matter of fact, how Putin eventually got into power after the USSR collapsed was like a mob boss. Okay, gotcha now. Thank you. I was trying to figure that out. Megan says again, you see, even the cursed governor hold up his hand with a what expression when Putin says the military will inform you of the yeah, that was so bizarre. That reminded me of what happened like just before the invasion in 2022 when he had that assembled group of his bigwigs, his I don't know if it was cabinet or who exactly, some of his chief officers sitting at a distance, and he was saying, so what is your assessment? Should we invade? What is your assessment? What is your assessment? And when the one guy hedged, he's like, no, speak your mind. Tell the truth. What do you really think? Like, and just kind of shamed him into saying Putin's line. If you can't speak truth to power, you're in a very, very bad position. That's true organizationally as well as it is within a country. But here the stakes are just so incredibly high, and Putin just he couldn't hear real opposition, and there was very little real opposition that was even willing to come, so he had to be paying even closer attention, or he got himself into a huge mess as a consequence. Still waiting for the popcorn and show from Akhmat. Yeah, Akhmat has, like, really pantsed themselves, haven't they? The Akhmat fighters, Kadyrov's TikTok warriors. I showed yesterday, in my last video last night, I showed his 16-year-old son, who's like the superintendent of the special forces in Chechnya. He's 16, and he was shooting two, like, I don't know, big machine guns, gold plated machine guns, two at a time, going, "Oh, look how tough I am, shooting both of these." It was the most remarkable thing. Like that's not so that's not a show of strength, right? Like I've been into martial arts for a number of years, and when somebody's not tough, when somebody doesn't really have anything going on, they're going to be like, "Whoa," trying to pretend like they have some kind of something. Somebody who really is confident and has some skill, just going to stand there. They might reposition themselves a little bit, but they're just going to stand there and look at you. They're not going to be doing that. So what you see in Chechnya with the Akhmat TikTok fighters is what it's a demonstration of what weak people who don't have the skills, like bullies. I mean, you just talk on a playground. A bully that doesn't have the skill is going to do in order to try to intimidate, and it's just showing he doesn't have what he needs. Okay, at any rate, I've belabored that too long. Okay, Max says, what about the chief of Paladin military group? Yeah, that was interesting yesterday. He's holding Putin responsible and said he must leave on video. And you know anything about this group? I talked about him last night in my three big stories, four big stories, but talked about him last night, that he was willing to say the so-called president, Putin, yeah, like that he was willing to speak to that tells you that he's not afraid and he believes that others are in that same kind of mindset. And that's really something. Now, this little paramilitary group is not really that large, but it's not about the size of the Palatine paramilitary or PMC. It's about that he was willing to say what he was willing to say. Okay. Um, let's see. All right. So I already have somebody who wants to get themselves banned. So if I don't remove people unless they do stuff like this last guy that I'm just removing right now, unless they're saying things that are um, like just rude to people in the community. I don't tolerate that. You can express your thoughts and have a whatever mindset you like and have a real conversation. But once you start being like rude or corrosive to others, I ban you. So we already had one of those. How about that? Okay, like Tyson said, everyone talks tough until he gets punched in the face. That's right. Once you get hit, when you get hit, you know it, and it changes your perspective and makes you a little bit more cautious in the next round. Okay, so true, exactly about your comment regarding the Akhmat warriors. Okay, for a Republican, voting for which candidate in the upcoming elections would be helpful to Ukraine to win the war? Well, it looks like Harris is going to continue the Biden administration's policies. Trump doesn't seem like he's going to be, but he's Trump. Who knows what's going to happen? He's a wild card, but I wouldn't bet on him. I'm not betting on him. I'm not voting for him. I'm also not voting for Harris because I just can't vote for Harris for multiple reasons. But it doesn't really matter in my state. It matters in about six states, maybe seven now, actually, because has really taken on. So when I say it doesn't matter in my state, you have to understand the American political system, the electors, the winner of the election, whether it's by one or by 500,000, all the electors in almost all the states, there's a couple of exceptions, throw their votes toward that one candidate. So uh, in my state, it's going to go for the Republican by 300,000, regardless of what's done. It doesn't really matter. The action for me was in the primary. I got to vote for Haley, but yeah, that's about as good as it's going to get. Okay, but in about six, seven states, it will matter. So she'll continue Biden's policy, which we're just looking at now. The article in Politico yesterday about how Biden's legacy is probably going to be that he didn't do enough. But she's still, and he is still supporting Ukraine without, but again, Biden right now, he's like afraid of upsetting Russia post-war. Like that's what the Politico article yesterday was talking about. Biden's afraid of upsetting Russia in the post-war, and that's why they're not allowing Russia to win the war, or sorry, not allowing Ukraine to win the war with Russia right now. So it's just this full on like self-deterrence that I just can't wrap my mind around. But still, the Biden administration is still the better support for Ukraine than the Trump administration, mm, probably, if that answers your question. Okay, full Irish Gary. Hey from Dublin. Thanks, Professor, for staying in the fight. Your efforts make a difference to Ukraine and her friends. I hope so. I mean, I hope that this is informative when we're working together with Greg Terry to raise money. Oh, by the way, if you haven't seen, like, look for Greg's videos here shortly because, like, just got to see what the armored ambulance looks like. Like, they're on the way, they're being delivered, they're en route, paid for. Yeah, that's big time. That's important stuff. Okay, post my question again. Any news about Russian Kharkiv incursion? Are they still trying to hold that land? Greetings from Sweden. Yeah, so it looks like the Ukrainians made a yesterday, I saw Jason J. Smar talk about the Ukrainians. We got 2 kilometers deep into Russian lines in Kharkiv. I haven't seen any more. I can't explain anymore because I haven't seen any more. But I think the Ukrainians. So Greg earlier was talking about how the Russians don't see Kursk any different than they see Zaporizhia or Donetsk or whatever. It's all theirs. So it's uh, the Ukrainians don't think that way. The Ukrainians really want to push them out of Ukrainian land. And so I think that you're going to see a big push going that direction pretty soon. Flyer Gary, there was a terror stabbing in Germany last night. Folks have died and the killer is still loose. I don't know anything about that because I was only paying attention to Ukrainian news this morning, and I haven't seen anything. I'm sure I'll see something in a little bit. Okay. Um, let's see what else. Thanks for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine. Well, thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine. I mean, I know I'm not everybody's cup of tea, uh, and when you watch my video, my well, the aesthetic qualities of my videos are not great, but I'm trying desperately to show you my sources because I've watched too many people say inane things by just they'll show like the title of or the headline of a news article and then they'll misrepresent the news article and that's infuriating to me. I saw Richard Medhurst, who was just recently arrested or detained at the airport and was complaining about that, talk about this with the Novakahova Dam, and he took a New York Times article and said, "Well, see, even the New York Times says this," and then I had just read that New York Times article. I'm like, "That's not what it said at all. It said exactly the opposite," but he was twisting it to what he wanted it to say to make his point, and so that's why I highlight and cite my sources and show you what I'm saying, and it's probably over the top, but at least you know I'm showing you the legit thing. So okay, um, as a Canadian, I find it hard to imagine why a country so massive would want even more land to be responsible for. That's interesting. I mean, but they just seem to need to dominate something like it. And Putin's trying to make a name for himself. He wants to go down as Vladimir the Great in history as Vladimir Putin the Great. So yeah, it's something. Aesthetic qualities, more like the stacks of crazy person's library. I'm not sure what we're saying here, James. Zion describes the plug in the game theory, plug in a gap theory. Yeah, I mean, okay. There was another question here. Do you know anything about Ukraine's new drone? Okay, we talked about this in my daily brief, but I haven't posted it yet. I just recorded it just before we came on. And we don't really know. It has some functionality like a missile, some functionality like a drone, and apparently it was already used. Can it go further or farther? Probably. Can it? Does it have more? So the important thing about the Polonista drone is that it's Ukrainian grown and it's a new technological advance from Ukraine that Ukraine can use anywhere, and Ukraine will use it to some significant effect within Russia. Now, somebody was talking about Russia's already so big. You know that phrase, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. I think there's something to that here with Russia. It's going to be hard to be able to defend everything. They certainly don't have enough air defense to be able to put, so they're going to protect Moscow really well, just like Ukrainians will protect Kiev. But there's so many targets of opportunity within Russia that the Ukrainian will to strike at Russia is going to be no match. Like, the Russians aren't going to be able to defend against it. They just can't. It's too big. There's too many targets, and they're not going to even have to wantonly target the civilian population in order to, um, like, terrorize the population. They're not going to do that. They're going to go after legitimate targets, and there are so many legitimate targets in such a large country that it'll be just terrible for the Russians moving forward. Um, okay, George, thank you for all your updates from an old-fashioned Republican that does want Trump. And now there's a really interesting mixed bag, and I get that, George. You know, when you hear Trump talk about Ukraine, more and more the message is not, I'm going to just end it or that kind of thing, but this would have never happened if it was Biden. Now that's just a normal political contrast kind of thing. If Biden wasn't in office, this never would have happened. He never would have done it for me. Never, never would have done it. Right. Okay. And I I know a lot of Republicans who think that way. Now, I'm a little skeptical, but it's possible that he could be, really tough on Putin. I don't buy the line that he's in Putin's pocket, or Putin's got dirt on him or something like that. I Trump's just about Trump, and but he's such a wild card that he makes me nervous. Okay, Ozzy, Russia's expansionary impulse. Vlad Vexler has talked about a bit about Russia suffering from borderlessness, which has been born out of passive reaction to the passive reaction to the cursed incursion. Yeah, because they just see everything as theirs. Yeah. Kevin Delaney, Professor, good morning from Ottawa, Canada. Is there any increase in unrest in Moscow or St. Petersburg metro areas against Putin due to Kursk? There is more unrest than before Kursk. I don't think there's enough to make any difference. Um, what's happened in Kursk has really affected only it's affected them locally by very significantly. Like, the people within Kursk, 150,000, roughly, give or take 20,000, have had to evacuate, right? And then, the mothers worried about their sons who are conscripts, who don't want to be there, who are being captured. By the way, there's already a POW exchange of these uh, conscripts, right? Um, so it affects different places differently. I don't know that the elite in St. Petersburg and Moscow really care yet, but it might be a matter of time. But it's also kind of a thumb in the eye to those that are patriotic, who are saying, we're just so awesome and they're terrible and they can't do anything. Solyov was just saying, like, don't say that they don't have some military strength or military ability. They do. Stop lying. Well, he's been lying for 2 years about their military strength, and uh, it's wild to watch. Alex Kilmov says, "Good morning, Professor. What are your thoughts if Russian economy can afford for another mobilization? Many sources I saw claim critical lack of labor everywhere." Okay, so that's a double-edged sword. It applies as much to Ukraine, maybe even more to Ukraine than it does to Russia. But Putin does not want to mobilize. So he is scraping the bottom of the barrel everywhere that he can, from prisons to migrants to whatever. You just got your citizenship in Russia. Good luck. You're on your way to Ukraine. Um, because he doesn't want to do what happened last time that he announced the mobilization round. And yeah, I mean, so it's problematic. It's even more problematic for the Ukrainians. They have fewer people by, it's a third of the Russian population, and, I mean, they're gonna run. So the Ukrainians can't fight a war of attrition, and they know that, and, so they have to leverage technology in order to beat Russia. Russia can play, like, um I'm trying to think of an analogy. It's like Russia can play football or rugby, but Ukraine has to play soccer against them playing football or rugby. I don't know if that makes sense, but they have to play a different game. When you watch folks play soccer, it looks like I was explaining to my children when they were in like little soccer leagues. Like soccer is almost like playing keep away. That's very different than what they do when they play rugby. Russia can play rugby all day long and just keep throwing meat at the grinder. Ukraine doesn't have the luxury of doing that, so they have to play a different game. Okay. They have to fight smarter and more tactical. That's exactly right, Tim. Another thing is that is there really an event that can occur which will bring the unrest in Russia to make a difference? I'm not so sure that there is. I mean, I really don't know what would happen, what would have to happen in Russia that would make a difference, short of an economic collapse or some sort of massive catastrophic political event. For my money, that's how I would imagine the war will end, is that there will either be a collapse of the Ukrainian military on the one side, and I don't see that. I just the will to fight in the Ukrainian military is is just so high, um, and it's just a matter of manpower, and not just manpower, but ammunition. Like Zelensky was talking about how he just doesn't have enough. Like partners have promised these weapons, like these artillery pieces or these shells or whatever else. We need to deliver, so that shortage is one thing. The manpower shortage is the other. On the Russian side, it's not a manpower shortage as much as it, because they can just start reactivating people back into the military, and they're willing to do it. They have no compunction about it. Um, but the real issue there is going to be something more along the lines of an economic collapse, in my mind, or a political event that's just like a big shakeup. Okay, that's just my thought. I could be totally wrong about that. Listen to others, make up your own mind about what you think is going to happen. Okay. Let's see. Joseph Gallagher, thank you for your channel and sharing. I was a Republican but switched to a Democrat. This is because of what Trump said about our military and disrespectful comment to John McCain. That was disrespectful. He shouldn't have said that. Absolutely. Trump has been, just like a bull in the china shop, to Republicans, and it's making it harder and harder to see what Republicans actually are. I don't buy the idea that the Republican Party is dead. There is going to be a Republican Party civil war on the other side of Trump, though, trying to take back the soul of the party. Okay, leave a like for the professor. Thank you, Master of None. I appreciate that. Any likes that you put in there will help this live stream get more play, and I appreciate that. Anytime that you want to spread this message, if you can share on any social media, any of these videos, that helps me the most. The second most helpful thing you can do is hit the like button to make it more visible to other people. So I appreciate that. Um, Morning, Professor. This is Jeffrey Shoot. Good morning, Professor. Could Putin's obsession with the Nesk at the risk to curse be attributed to the sunk cost fallacy? I've thought a lot about that. So if you don't know what the sunk cost fallacy is, you put good money after bad because you've already invested. Like, let's say you have a terrible car that's it's just a lemon. It keeps needing repairs and repairs and repairs. Well, okay, it needs another $1,000 of repair. Well, I already put $8,000 into it, so I don't want to not do it. Okay, well, maybe at a certain point, it's going to cost you more and more. Don't worry about what you've put in so far. Worry about the calculation from right now, because you can't really do anything about what you've done before. And so we skew the way that we think about things with the sunk cost fallacy. So I think that could be that, but I think more than that, he really wants to take that real estate because that is a pivotal place for holding ground and moving forward and pushing the Ukrainians back. And he knows it and they know it. And so now they kind of have to play that football or rugby game that the Russians are playing there rather than playing soccer. And when I say soccer, I mean the other football. When I say football, I meant American football. So rugby as opposed to soccer. They just have to play that game there until they can find something else. Like maybe this new drone rocket will help them do something, but I wouldn't count on it. And at the rate they're going, it's about a month, short of some other something happening. Uh, let's see here. I was just talking to some. Thank you for your channel. Okay. And instead of MAGA or MUGA, it should be MEGA, make Earth great again. Humans are pretty terrible to each other. And it's just like if you look back at the history of what humans have done to humans, or wow. Okay. Anyway, I'm digressing. Peter Webb, is it possible that both sides are willing to take loss now if it increases their chances of an overall win later? So, Peter, I'm not sure what you're suggesting here. I mean, is this possible? I'm not sure what you mean by that, and I'm willing to entertain the thought. Um, will Yanukovych be sent to Ukraine? Probably. Well, I mean, if they lose, and if Russia loses, will that be part of the conditions? Maybe, I don't know. To rule, I'm pretty sure not. To be in charge, I'm pretty sure not. They seem to have lined up an oligarch or two that they would be willing to put in place to for Zelensky. Oh, by the way, this is great. Go to Operator Starsky's channel and look at his video from yesterday about propaganda. It was freaking awesome. I put a post on my about this on my community tab. It was great. I could give a shout out last night in last night's three big stories. It was really good. So, for example, people will talk about things like, well, Zelensky's a dictator who doesn't want to have elections. No, according to the Constitution, and I don't remember which article. I want to say it was 16, Article 16, or whatever article it was. It says here you can't have elections during a time of war. You can't elect the president or the Verkhonorada or change the Constitution. So not only can't they elect have a re-election for Zelensky, but they can't even change the Constitution to allow him. Like, so that kind of thing just debunks the argument very easily. And he went through like thing after thing after thing after thing in that video yesterday. It was awesome. So please go see Operator Starsky's video about that. Okay. Unfortunately, Orban has already made Europe great again. Orban, I think Orban's calculus is that Russia is bigger and stronger and will certainly win the war, and then I'll be in the good graces of the winning side. I think that's where he is. I don't know that he necessarily believes everything there, but even if let's say he doesn't really matter. I think he's doing it for that. Like, that's his political calculation. Redheads over Florida, state uniforms everywhere. I don't know what that means. There's a big college football game here in Dublin today. Dublin City has turned into a young GOP playground. Yeah, it's frustrating seeing what's happened to the Republican Party. I like a strong, robust Republican Party, but not this kind of populist, isolationist, anti-foreign policy. Okay. Within conservatives, there were three legs to the stool. There were social conservative, economic, like free market conservatism, and then foreign policy. That all three legs were important, and that was Reagan. And like, we've destroyed one of those legs with Trump. Like, this foreign policy thing, that doesn't really matter. No, it does. It's significant, and if you mishandle it, you could be into World War III if you're not careful. Anyway, okay, I'm digressing here. Alex77 says, do I foresee any game changers showing up soon, or is this slow and steady since winter is coming? I have to admit that I didn't see Kursk happening. And since I didn't see Kursk happening, I'm not necessarily qualified to say, do I see any game changers? I don't see them, but that doesn't mean that there won't be anything. We're to a place now where there's not going to be like one big knockout blow to my mind, but there will be perhaps several things like Kursk Maybe there's going to be an offensive in Kharkiv. Those kind of things that will compound and add to each other. But I don't think that we're at a big knockout kind of thing, and I don't think we're stuck at attritional warfare forever. I think that's fair, but that's all I can say because I can't really predict. I'm sorry, I'm not in the prediction business. I'm in the here explaining what's happened business. Okay. Russia's bluff has been called out. Yes, these red lines. What red lines? Where are the red lines? Like the whole idea that we have red lines, and if you cross them, we're going to nuke you. What happened to that? Like it's almost laughable now. The Hill has reported several oligarchs have suggested a coup. How realistic is this? If so, what's the potential timeline? Okay, when I say that there's going to be either a significant economic or political event, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. It might not just be that; it could be broader than that, but that could be it. But I don't know how likely it is. I don't know. I mean, that could be wishful thinking on my part rather than something that's likely. And you don't know how a Putin replacement will be toward Ukraine. He could be conciliatory, whoever it is, or he could, for the glory of Mother Russia, we have to do this because they're somewhat crazy about that sort of thing. Okay, USSR with double Russia population could not occupy Afghanistan with half of Ukraine's population. History has shown us, with the modern world, you cannot occupy a nation of 40 million who despise you. You know what? There's some truth to that. So those with the max, and now they haven't shed their maximalist objectives, but those with maximalist objectives are just not in reality. It is possible to hold on potentially for Russia to hold on potentially to some parts of, say, Donbass or Crimea, although Crimea is being choked right now. Here's what I perceive is that Crimea is slowly being systematically choked out so that it's going to be untenable to hold, and the Russians will be likely chased out of Crimea before they would be chased out of Donbass. And yeah, I think that's what's in the works. Everything that I see them attack, like the ferry yesterday, they're attacking that ferry so that the logistics can't get across. And then when the Kerch is out, because the ferry is the only, the ferry is no longer, and they attack the Kerch bridge. I think that's going to be a big sign that they're going after Crimea in earnest. Okay. Putting all politics aside, what do you think an elected Trump's approach would be to Ukraine? He's given no speeches on his plan. I can't predict him. I mean, he says some things that make me think he's going to be absolutely terrible for Ukraine, and I think that's possible. And then there are other parts of what he says that makes me think, yeah, I don't think his ego is going to allow him to let Putin do that and have it look like a black mark on the US and for like letting that happen. But I can't predict it. It's easier to predict what Harris will do if she's elected, and but I just can't predict it. I know people on that fully believe that Trump would just go there and wipe them out, and I'm like, I'm not so sure. I see the evidence. I'd like to believe that if that was the case. I mean, if he was elected, I'd like to see that he would like just give the Ukrainians the green light. So this wing of that group says that they would green light all the weapons, use all the weapons you want, go knock them out, make this happen, get this thing over. And then there's others that say, well, no, he's Putin's pawn. I don't see the Putin pawn thing, but I'm not so sure I believe the other side. So that was not helpful. I'm sorry. Happy Independence Day to everyone in Ukraine. Yeah, it's a important date. Trump doesn't have a plan. Perhaps that's right. Megan, you're probably right. Um, Drill, baby, drill. If the price of oil goes back to $50 a barrel, the Russian government and the war over quickly. No, but that would be the kind of thing that would spur on the economic detrimental effects that I was talking about. I don't think it happens quickly, but I think it takes away. So remember, the Russian government, about a third of their economy is, or budget rather, is based on oil and natural gas. And if they can't sell that, or if they can only sell that at such a low price, it's going to really impact them. So, I mean, unless you're just a radical environmentalist, the idea of drilling more oil and like to bring down that cost is an alluring thing if you care about Ukraine. I really like Jake Bro. Can you invite him? Thank you. We've already had a discussion here. Go and look on my playlist on collaborations. Jake and I have already talked before. Happy Independence Day, Ukraine. Heroyam Slava. How do the Russian people feel about all this? So, generally, now this is a very broad stereotype, but generally, it seems like Russians don't want to be involved, want Russia to just win and be over, but they don't want to involve themselves. They don't like that Ukrainians are across the border, but hey, this kind of thing happens, but I'm not involved. It's none of my business. They've been beat down so long, not just through the Soviet Union, but even in the Putin era. Putin is kind of authoritarianizing, if I could say that. I did say that, so I'm going to say that. While Ukraine, since independence, since the early 90s, has gone one way toward more European, Russia has gone back toward the Soviet Union, not in a communist ideology, but in just having a strong man at the helm, being an authoritarian. And so I'm not getting involved. That's kind of the stance. Nerds Entertainment Channel, please talk about the Budapest Memorandum. I've talked about the Budapest Memorandum till I'm blue in the face. I mean, I spent many, many videos talking about it. It's just we said the UK, US, and Russia guaranteed if Ukraine gives up its nukes, all those nukes go to Russia, and the US, UK, and Russia guaranteed Ukraine's sovereign borders. Ironically, it was Russia was one of those parties that was guaranteeing their borders, which is why Ukraine doesn't have any nukes, which is why Russia blackmails with nuclear threats. But if they had nukes, I'm pretty sure this wouldn't be happening. And so now this is a cautionary tale to other countries around the world. Get nukes so this doesn't happen to you. And you can use the same logic with NATO. If they were part of NATO, there's a reason that they're rolling over um, Ukraine and not Poland, right? If they were part of NATO, this wouldn't be happening. So, you think Ukraine is going to get back Crimea? It's quite possible. I can't see what I can't see, right? So I don't know, but they seem to be setting up to. So they keep going after radar systems, S-300s, all the kinds of things that Russia needs in order to really defend Crimea. They seem to be targeting more and more logistics hubs, ammunition depots, transport to get, like the ferry yesterday, that sort of thing. So the signs. I was watching Midway yesterday. Midway is the movie about the Battle of Midway in World War II. And the code breakers gave this interesting analogy. He said, well, so I can't really tell you. I don't have enough evidence to say, here, I have a wedding invitation. But if I see that all the flowers are being bought up and the caterers are being called, and there's lots of people that are planning to all be in a certain place, I know something like a wedding is about to happen. Right. So it's that sort of thing. That's what I see. I don't see I don't have privileged information. Alex Kilmoff says, Professor, what's the difference between authoritarian and totalitarian country? For our purposes, it doesn't really matter. Um, there's no right to life for Russia today. Does it qualify as totalitarian? It's becoming increasingly totalitarian. So total, like I'm in charge totally of your running your life. Uh, I don't know that Putin cares to be totalitarian as long as he gets the authoritarianism. Like, as long as you just do what Putin says, he doesn't care about controlling everything in your life. He just wants you to make sure you do what he tells you. If that makes sense. It's not the totalitarian is more like ideological control beyond the authoritarianism, if that makes some sense. Okay. Okay, Smokey of Stormwind says that too. It depends on how useful the country is to the U.S. It will honor any security guarantee. But the US has come through with a security guarantee, and the UK, to their credit, was really there from the very start of this. And Russia violated this. Russia wants to squawk about Minsk II and that sort of thing. What about with the Budapest Memorandum, where you violated this to begin with? Like, you're to blame for everything that's going on. None of this would happen if you had just stayed over on your side of the border, not just in 2022, but in 2014. How bad will this winter be? I heard Kursk is a natural gas hub. Okay, so the natural gas hub thing is that there is a pipeline that goes through Kursk and then through Ukraine into Europe, and that's where that pipeline hub is for all of Europe. Um, so I'm not really worried about that aspect of it, but how bad will the winter be? The winter's going to be bad. The power is going to have a hard time keeping up, and Putin's been targeting, like, intentionally targeting all the power generation facilities, and they're at a small fraction of what they actually need. So the summer was hot, the winter is going to be very cold. There's not enough generators. They're working on, like, let's see, Gerashenko was talking about a fundraiser for generators for hospitals. Like, that's where they are. So the winter is going to be freaking miserable for the Ukrainians, and that's what I perceive at this point. Okay, Bill Smith. Despite their latter-day epiphany, British politicians have a lot to answer for in relation to empowering Russia. Man, everyone does. So, like, just look at even like Nord Stream, the Nord Stream pipeline, right? I mean, that was Russia waging warfare economically by capturing Germany so that they wouldn't lay in against them. That's what it was. Cheap Russian oil to kind of buy off their loyalty. That's what was going on there. And it looked like, in theory, great. They won't have a war because everybody's making money, nobody's wanting the war. Except Putin wants the war. So, you know, um, if one party doesn't want to fight and the other party wants to fight because you have to. Like, that's what this amounts to. So, okay, George, what a great live chat. Many different views on how we all grow by listening to different ideas and views. Sure, and listen to others. Don't I mean, I joke, if you're going to listen to only one video today, watch mine too, right? But that's just haha. But seriously, you need to listen to other perspectives and other voices. Those that disagree with me may have something that will help you understand something else in a different, meaningful way and help you triangulate and make sense of what's going on. So, and anybody who tells you, oh, you just only need to listen to me, that's not the person you want to listen to. Okay, more times than not, that's true. Okay, just a quick chime in on a totalitarian authoritarian question, colon. So maybe he's going to add something to that. I don't know. Uh, is there a non-scam foundation to donate to that supports Ukraine? If you go into the comments of all my videos, I have partnered with Greg Terry, who has been in Ukraine for the last like 20 years working. Now he's been there, and the organization, the money goes through his church's nonprofit, and that's how they nonprofitize the proceeds. But like, we've raised collectively between Greg and myself and Rick the Ukrainian, and Mercado was involved in this. Operator Starsky weighed in at some points to raise like hundreds of thousands of dollars for medical supplies, for armored ambulances and things along those lines. So yeah, that's where I personally don't want any money coming to me for like charitable stuff. I try to funnel it right to him. Like, if you want to support my channel and what I'm doing, I have links for that. And I also make it very clear, if you want to support Ukraine directly, go to these links here. And because I don't want to be like holding money that's meant for Ukraine, I want it to go directly where it's supposed to go. Okay. Professor, Ukraine festival in Horsham, Pennsylvania tomorrow. Going. Well, I'm not in Pennsylvania, but that's kind of cool. I'd like to see something like that. That'd be kind of awesome to be to. I hope you enjoy that if you're going. Jake Bro, Arthur Ray, Rick the Ukrainian are just a few places to donate. Oh, but by the way, Jake Bro. So to answer your question, Jake Bro right now is doing $1 million fundraiser. He did one on his birthday and it got out of hand. It was supposed to be like a, I don't know, 40,000 or something fundraiser, and it got out of hand. It became $1 million fundraiser by the time it was done. He's doing a second $1 million fundraiser right now. You can trust where that's going. It's not a scam. It's going directly to um, oh man, I'm trying. I just just lost the. It's the who creates the vehicles. So somebody put it in the comments. You know what I'm talking about. That the NAFO vehicle. Um, like they start in Estonia, they rehab the vehicles, and they put them out. NAFO truck campaign. Thank you very much, Thorn. And so that is completely trustworthy. But where I have decided to give was to partner with Greg Terry and to do those kind of things. And generally speaking, what we have given to is like humanitarian issues for troops, like tourniquets and things along those lines that they need in order to survive. And that's just where our hearts are. Okay. Let's see here. For donations, I always look at Euromaidan's list of verified organizations. Okay, that's good. Um, let's see. Jake Bro, Arthur Ray, authoritarian. Here's authoritarian means that one guy controls everything, and that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Putin. He just has to. It's got to be all about Putin. In Russia, that's Putin. Totalitarian means that powers that be control the totality of citizens' lives, their jobs, their culture, their sports, hobbies. So when you think totalitarian, you also tend to couple that with a ideology. Putin doesn't have an ideology except it's about me. It's about, it's about Putin. Where the communists had a totalitarian ideology that you must believe these things a certain way. Putin just wants your obedience, not necessarily your heart. I don't know if that makes sense. I think that's the difference here. But they have effectively the same kind of controlling effect, although totalitarian is far more than authoritarian, but essentially he wants you to obey. Okay, Jake Bro is teaming up with NAFO 69 Sniffing Brigade and his second campaign. And yeah, that's the NAFO truck thing. And he's doing both trucks and drones. Okay, Ronnie Vraken. What do you make of the news that there are oligarchs speaking about undermining Putin? I haven't seen much of it yet. If I see, I'm paying attention to that. I've only seen little bits, so I don't have enough to be able to say more than what we've already said. Okay, let's see. We're 9:52, so we've gone almost an hour. What other questions you have? I'll answer as much as I can, and then we'll be done in 10-15 minutes. Tell me what other questions you have. And in the meantime, I'm going to scroll back up for other questions. Authoritarian. I see a few Trump interviews online. He always says he'll end the conflict in a day, but he never says at what cost to the Ukrainian people. Yeah. So if you want to understand Trump, don't try to accurately listen for precision. He never speaks with precision. He's always speaking for effect. So when he says in a day, he's trying to say, I'm going to end it quick. If you just listen to Trump, every time you listen to Trump, think he's just trying to speak to enlarge what he's saying or to make it louder with the words that he chooses. He's not trying to say in 24 literal hours, I will have concluded that. That's not what he's trying to do. He's never trying to do that. Can you please play today's Zelensky's address? It's very powerful. It's on YouTube. Okay, well, I'll go back and look at that. I think full Irish Gary. I think the question you're referring to sounds questionable, for lack of a better word. Don't know what we're talking about. Thorn talking to the full Irish Gary. Gotcha, because you were cross talking. I didn't catch that. Oligarchs are afraid to fall out windows. They will not lift a finger. So until there's a critical mass, they won't do that. And I don't know that they'll get critical mass. So it may be that nothing happens there. Absolutely exhilarating to think that your donation might be the reason why this or that one occupier was killed. I find it. I reverse that. I find it exhilarating to think that my donation has saved a Ukrainian soldier's life. So that's just my fundamental disposition is, and working with Greg, like, let's get tourniquets and gauze and these kind of things that soldiers need in order to survive. And it's crazy that you have to raise money or raise resources for soldiers who are on the front line, and they have to take their own, like, personal vehicles drive toward the front. I mean, it's just crazy. Okay. Trump thinks it's just some other business deal. Yeah, I think Trump doesn't have the perspective of the enormity of what it is and what it really means that I wish he did. Here's a question for us listeners. How can we in our daily lives contribute to the Ukrainian cause? Social media contribute contributions, pressuring our governments, spreading the word on fundraisers. That's a good question. I mean, if others want to answer that, go ahead and try to put that into the chat. I think that's a great thing to talk about. I try to, just make my goal here is twofold. It's to provide context, and then when we're doing these fundraisers, to help channel your frustration and desire to help through a legitimate channel to get that aid to the front line. And that's, I mean, that's my twofold mission. And so when other people want to divert me from that, I'm not at all interested in anything other than what I'm doing here, because this is what my purpose here is on YouTube. Let's see here. It's more likely that crowdfunding will save lives than take lives based on what is bought. And okay, so that may very well be, and that's where I am on that. I'm trying to, like, make sure as many Ukrainian soldiers are surviving as possible with the fundraising that I've been involved in. And so that's just how I've processed this. How do today's prisoner release of Ukrainian soldiers sit with hardline Russians in Putin's inner circle? Cheers from Northern Ireland. Don't know, because I haven't read about that, but uh, they I'm sure there has to be. It's really fascinating to watch this too. I read about a month ago that 95%, this was in a legitimate source too, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Maybe it was Kharkiv Human Rights organization or something along those lines. But like 95% of Ukrainians in captivity report some sort of torture. Um, I can't understand for the life of me the difference in mindset. Like, Russians came across the border and were immediately looting and pillaging, and Ukrainians come across the border into Russia, and they just turned the lights back on and were restoring plumbing, not plumbing, water, and they were right. I mean, just such a difference in the way that they act. Ukrainian or Russian conscripts in Ukraine's charge have been treated fairly well. It was a UN report. Thank you, Georgie. I appreciate that. We were talking about the report about the 95%. It was a UN report that was talking about that. Just the difference in mentality is just so stark. It's almost baffling. Like, and then Russian soldiers looting Russian stores, Russian houses, Russian civilians looting each other's stuff, but it's not Ukrainians going in doing that, even though, like, it's like they would have every, yeah. I say, hey, people are saying hi to Georgie now. You'd think like Ukrainians would have almost like a feeling that they have a right to go do that, to do it back to them, but they're not. There's such a difference in the mentality between Ukrainians and Russians. It's really substantial. Okay. Andrew Lynch is taking some podunk villages in Kursk really worth giving up across Donbass and maybe even all of eastern Ukraine. So they're taking a calculated risk, but like I said, they're playing a different game. And I think they have to play a different game because the attritional game is not a game that they really want to fight. So the analogy there that I gave earlier was like the Russians want to play rugby, the Ukrainians want to play soccer, which is keep away. Another example, in the American Revolution, George Washington was not really a great general. like in the classical sense. What Washington did was run a track meet and not get captured. I mean, really, he engaged the British a few times, but most of the time, what Washington did was with his army was simply not get captured, and he won the revolution that way. And the Ukrainians have to kind of do that. Like they could have ambushes, and they could do this. They could hit them at certain times. They crossed the Delaware and sacked a large army. They eventually cornered them at Yorktown because they had it, clear. The French were bottling up on the riverside, and they could press them there. But yeah, Fabian tactics. That's right. Um, but they have to play a different game. If they tried to play the game that the British were playing, everybody come out and mash your soldiers and musket fire and directly line up against each other, they would have lost. Ukraine has to do the same kind of thing. They cannot play the Russians' game directly. So what they're doing is more than just a diversionary tactic, to my mind. What they're doing um, uh, is causing them to be off balance by having to adjust to a game that they're not used to playing. I hope that helps. Yeah, like we were talking about the UN report earlier that Georgie mentioned. Professor G, you only have to compare the condition of the POWs being swapped. That's right. Look at the skeleton-like POWs coming back from that are Ukrainians coming back from Russian captivity, as opposed to the conscripts that have been well treated. Uh, let's see here. POW, not military. Gorkek Roman Vasilovich, Chernobyl security guard, victim of Russian hunger, torture, and female police officer Maria Chelakluk from Mariupol. I'm not sure what you're telling me here. What about them? Okay, forget the simple fact that the shelling of civilian targets and victims in the border region decreased big time. Yeah, that was another big thing. Decreased big time since the incursion in Kursk. Zelensky was talking about this yesterday. So just going into Kursk also had the positive effect of it decreased Russian shelling in Ukrainian civilian targets. And even that we're talking about Ukrainian civilian targets, you don't see certainly some civilian areas have been hit somehow in the war, but you don't see the Ukrainians going after civilian targets for the purpose of creating angst within the population, like what the Russians do to an apartment building or a playground or something along those lines. They're really going after. They're spending their ammunition, and they're outspent. The latest I saw was they were complaining about 3 or 5 to 1, which is really pretty good. Like artillery rounds, 3 or 5 to 1 is far better than the like 10 to 1 that it was just a few months ago. Like back in early spring, they were significantly outnumbered. But they're spending their weapons on legitimate targets, trying to have an effect rather than trying to cause fear in the population. Um, let's see here. Would you let the Russians get to the American astronauts from the USS, the space station, while knowing they could get hostages in Mordor? I, I mean, I doubt that they would take them as hostages, astronauts from the space station. I, I doubt something like that's going to happen. I do think that there are going to be some other trumped up charges against some other hostage somewhere because of the hostage exchange that we just had, which is basically what that was, for war criminals, for getting back a reporter and some other. Yeah, I don't think that was I don't think that was the win or the victory that the administration thought it was. Okay, I find it hard to believe that a country that can't even maintain basic military equipment would be able to maintain nuclear weapons. Well, that might be, but remember, the threat is more powerful than the action in many regards, and so the threat of nuclear war has deterred the West in a significant way. I mean, like Putin's biggest victory in this whole thing has been how masterfully he has deterred the West. Okay. It is 10:04, so just a few more questions and then we'll be done. We don't know how good their nukes are maintained. That's true. Look who's looting in Kursk region now and who's providing food and water. Exactly. Uh, do whatever it takes to get your people home. It's possible that Russia will just turn, or is it possible that Russia will just turn Kursk into another place of attritional warfare, only this time attriting Ukraine's best combat units and equipment? I feel like this could quicken a defeat. So if it went sideways, it could quicken a defeat, but I don't see it going sideways. I see it, there's been huge positive gains, including the replenishment of POWs to trade, let alone the psychological issue within. Like, there are there's an incursion over the Russian border for the first time since World War II, and that's very important. Um, Bruce Ingles. So I thought you were okay. Ozzy, I'm going to leave you with the last comment here. Any Westerners remaining in Russia, leave. No more hostages. If you get in trouble, it will be on you. Yeah, I mean, that's right. You need to, like, be very careful with that sort of thing. Okay, my friends, that's all. Thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, for those of you who are willing to hit that like button so that it spreads, or share this or whatever. And I really do appreciate that you care enough to spend this time with me, just to talk about what's going on in Ukraine. This is very important. And you all have just been awesome, asking great questions. I mean, your questions alone are telling me how plugged in you are, and I appreciate it. All right. Thank you so much. And I'll see you another time. Bye bye.